The desert had been quiet for so long that even the wind forgot its voice. Ellie Carson rode slow beneath a pale morning sky, her horse's hooves stirring dust older than memory. She had $5 to her name and a folded paper in her saddlebag, the deed to a ranch no one wanted. Folks in town had laughed when she bought it. $5 for a ghost, they'd said. Ellie only smiled. Ghosts didn't scare her. What scared her was the idea of dying without ever owning a single piece of earth she could call hers. By noon, she saw it a dark shape against the sand-colored hills. The Carson Ranch, though no Carsons had ever owned it. The sign hung crooked, one chain broken, creaking in the dry wind. The fence had collapsed long ago, and the barn leaned like an old drunk remembering better days. The house itself looked like it had grown tired of being upright. Still, something in the sight made Ellie straighten in her saddle. It wasn't much, but it was standing. $5, she whispered. Guess you and me are worth about the same. She dismounted and led her horse through the gate, boots crunching on brittle grass. The air smelled of dust, sun, and something faint like old hay and iron. The porch groaned under her weight. She pushed open the door and winced as it scraped the floor. Inside, light filtered through cracks in the boards, cutting the shadows into pieces. The place was empty except for a broken chair, a rusted lantern, and a trail of hoofprints in the dirt floor. Ellie froze. Hoofprints. Fresh ones. Her hand drifted to the revolver on her hip. Well, she murmured, guess I ain't alone. As now way, we have not as no. She followed the tracks through the house, every step slow and careful. They led toward the back door, then out into the barnyard. The barn's wide doors were half open, the hinges hanging loose. A faint sound carried through the air, not human, not wind. A sharp exhale, heavy and alive. Ellie eased forward, the boards creaking beneath her boots. The smell hit her first wild, sharp, earthy. Then she saw it. In the gloom stood a Mustang, coat black as coal, eyes wide and glinting like lantern glass. The animal froze, muscles taut as wire. Ellie's breath caught. The Mustang was magnificent, taller than most, his mane tangled with burrs, ribs showing faintly beneath his hide. He stamped once, ears flicking, ready to bolt. Easy, she whispered, lowering her hand. Ain't here to hurt you. She'd gentled horses before, but never one like this. This was no ranch-bred gelding. This was the desert itself, given form proud, frightened, furious at captivity. A length of rope still hung from his neck, frayed and old. Whoever had owned this place before her had tried to break him, and failed. Ellie moved slow, talking softly, voice low and steady. You and me got that in common, she said. World tried to break us both. The Mustang snorted, hooves scraping the dirt. She took another step. Ain't gonna rope you, ain't gonna cage you neither. But you can't stay locked in this dark barn. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two creatures who'd learned the hard way that freedom cuts both ways. Then Ellie reached for the rope. The Mustang flinched, muscles bunching to run. All right, she said quietly. You tell me when you're ready. She spent the rest of the day clearing the barn, her every move deliberate. Old tools, rusted tack, and piles of straw long turned to dust, all dragged out into the sunlight. Each corner she cleaned revealed more signs that the horse had been there a long time. Chewed boards, worn ruts where he'd paced. When she finally opened both doors wide, the light flooded in, turning the air gold. The Mustang blinked against it, nostrils flaring. There, Ellie said softly. Now you can see what you've been missing. The horse didn't move, but his ears tilted toward her voice. That night, she slept in the house for the first time. The floorboards whispered beneath her bedroll, and the wind pressed against the shutters like an old friend begging to be let in. She dreamed of hooves drumming across sand, a black horse running under endless sky. When she woke before dawn, The Mustang was still in the barn, watching her through the half-open door. His eyes glowed faintly in the light of her lantern. "You're curious," she said. "That's good. Curiosity's how you stay alive." She cooked beans and coffee on a small fire outside, the smell drifting toward the barn. The Mustang stepped forward, head lowering to the ground, sniffing the air. Ellie pretended not to notice, just kept stirring. When she finished, she poured a little water into an old tin basin and set it near the fence. "There," she said. "Ain't much, but it's honest." She turned away, giving him the choice. It took a full minute before she heard the sound cautious steps, a muzzle dipping to drink. She smiled. "Good boy," she whispered. "Real good." By midday, she was fixing the fence, sweat streaking the dust on her skin. The Mustang watched her from the shade of the barn, muscles relaxed but wary. She talked to him while she worked about nothing and everything. About how she'd left Texas after the drought, about the ranchers who said women had no place with a hammer or a herd. "They weren't wrong," she said with a laugh. "But they weren't right neither." Her voice carried across the dry air, soft and sure. The horse flicked his tail, as if to say he was listening. As the sun dipped, Ellie sat on the porch with her boots off and a tin cup of coffee in her hands. The Mustang stood in the doorway of the barn, halfway between shadow and light. "You gonna tell me your name?" she asked. The horse lifted his head, ears pricked. "All right," she said. "Don't got one yet, huh? Guess we'll figure that out together." She tilted her cup in salute. "To second chances." The wind rose then, carrying the scent of sage and rain that never came. Somewhere far off, thunder muttered. The Mustang didn't flinch. The next morning, she found something odd near the well, an old horseshoe buried half in the dirt, newer than the rest of the junk around. She dug it out, noticing initials etched into the iron, H.M. Her brow furrowed. "You knew the last owner, didn't you?" she said aloud, glancing toward the barn. The Mustang flicked his tail. "What'd he do to you, boy?" she murmured. The horse turned away, nostrils flaring. She could tell the memory still lived in him, coiled tight like a scar. In town later that week, Ellie asked around. The barkeep leaned on the counter, eyes narrowing. "You're staying up at the Morrow place?" She nodded. "That's right. Old Hank Morrow's ranch? Ain't no one gone near there since he died. Folks say he was breeding wild stock. Tried to break a black stallion he caught off the flats. Killed him, near enough." Ellie's stomach tightened. "Killed who?" "Both, maybe," the man said with a shrug. "Hank's body was found trampled in the corral. Horse vanished. Guess you found him." Ellie didn't answer. She didn't have to. Back at the ranch, the Mustang stood by the corral fence, wind lifting his mane. Ellie walked up slow, holding out her hand. "You didn't kill him," she said softly. "You just survived." The horse lowered his head, nostrils brushing her fingers the first touch. It lasted a heartbeat, maybe two, but it was enough. "Yeah," she whispered. "You and me both." For the first time, he didn't retreat when she stepped closer. In the distance, lightning flickered again, far off, but coming nearer. The desert, it seemed, was listening. That night, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered the roof, turning dust to mud. Ellie rushed to close the barn doors, wind tearing at her coat. The Mustang reared once, frightened by the thunder. "Easy! Easy!" she shouted, voice steady. She moved slow, hand out, eyes never leaving his. "Ain't nothing to fear." You've seen worse storms. Lightning split the sky, bright enough to light the valley like daylight, and for one strange second, she swore she saw a figure behind the horse, a man's outline, then gone. She blinked hard. Just shadows, maybe. By morning, the air smelled sweet, washed clean. Water pooled in ruts and shimmered in the sunday. Ellie stood barefoot on the porch, coffee in hand, watching steam rise from the earth. The Mustang stepped from the barn, mud clinging to his legs. He looked freer somehow, shoulders looser, eyes softer. "Storm's over," she said. "Reckon we both made it." She took a few steps toward him. He didn't move away. She reached up, brushing a stray piece of hay from his mane. "You're not bad luck," she whispered. "You're proof luck can change." Days passed, then weeks. Ellie built a pen out back, sturdy but open. The Mustang began following her when she walked, keeping a respectful distance. At night, he'd linger near the house, his silhouette framed by starlight. Sometimes she'd talk to him through the window, her voice low, sleepy. "One day, you'll run again," she'd promise. "But not because you're scared, because you're ready." The horse would flick an ear, and she'd smile. "Maybe I'll run too," she'd add. "Can't let you have all the freedom." In town, whispers spread faster than wind. "That cowgirl's got a wild Mustang tamed," they said. "Same one that killed old Hank." Ellie ignored it, though she saw the looks. People always feared what they didn't understand. She bought salt, flour, nails, and rode home before sunset. The hills glowed gold and quiet. As she rode up the trail, she noticed something strange hoofprints again. Not the Mustang's. These were newer, deeper, shod. Someone had been on her land, watching, waiting. That night, she sat by the window with her rifle across her knees, lamp burning low. The Mustang grazed near the barn, peaceful but alert. She could feel it. Something was coming. The land had gone too still, like it was holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried. Ellie whispered into the dark, "Whoever you are, you picked the wrong ranch." Her voice didn't shake. The Mustang lifted his head, eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. It wasn't fear in him anymore. It was trust, and for the first time, she felt safe. Just before dawn, movement flickered by the fence, two figures, shadows against the pale horizon. Ellie rose, rifle steady, breath calm. The Mustang stamped once, ears pinned forward. "Stay," she murmured. The figures came closer, unaware they'd already been seen. Ellie smiled faintly. $5, she whispered to herself. "Guess that's all it takes to buy a fight worth having." The first light of morning spilled across the valley, catching on the barrel of her rifle. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge when Ellie heard the first sound. A hoof striking wood, not her horse's, not the Mustang's. She moved to the window, rifle still within reach. Down by the corral stood two men, coats dark, hats low. They were studying the barn like buyers at an auction. One pointed toward the Mustang, the other nodded. Ellie felt her jaw tighten. "So it's him you came for," she muttered. The Mustang, sensing her tension, snorted and pawed the dirt. "Easy, boy," she whispered. "We'll deal with this like civilized folks. Maybe." She stepped out onto the porch, rifle visible but low. "You boys lost?" she called. The taller one turned, a scar cutting across his cheek. "Morning, ma'am. Didn't mean to trespass. Just heard a story about a wild stallion holed up in these parts. We catch him, we'll pay fair." Ellie leaned against the post, calm as sunrise. "Ain't for sale." The man smiled, but not kindly. "Everything's for sale, cowgirl. Depends who's buying." She cocked her head. "And depends who's holding the rifle." The smile faded. "We'll be back," he said, bringing someone who talks louder. They rode off slow, dust trailing behind like a warning. Ellie waited until they disappeared beyond the ridge before exhaling. The Mustang stood near the fence, head high, muscles rippling with unease. "You've been hunted before," she said softly. "Guess it's my turn to stand between you and the rope." She spent the day reinforcing the corral, fixing the gate hinges, and moving her bedroll near the window. The quiet between hammer strikes felt heavy, but honest. The desert wasn't cruel, it just didn't lie. Neither did she. They'll come at night, she whispered. Let 'em. That evening she saddled her horse and rode into town. The saloon buzzed with voices and the clink of glass. She found Sheriff Harlan nursing his coffee, badge dull with disinterest. You gonna tell me you finally need the law, Miss Carson? He asked. Ellie sat across from him. Maybe. 2 men sniffing around my ranch, saying they're hunting a wild Mustang. Know 'em? Harlan frowned. Sounds like Cal Dixon and his brother. They've been rustling horses near the flats for months, mean as rattlers. Then I reckon they're about to meet one, she said, rising. The sheriff didn't smile. When she returned home, twilight had turned the valley violet and still. She could feel eyes on her before she saw movement by the fence line. A flicker of shadow, then nothing. You don't learn easy, do you? She said into the dark. She lit her lantern but kept it low, moving through the house with the quiet of someone who'd slept near danger before. The Mustang was restless, circling the pen. She leaned on the rail, hand out. You ain't mine, she whispered. But while you're here, you're under my roof, and my roof don't leak to thieves. The moon rose full and bright, painting the desert silver. Ellie sat by the window, rifle balanced across her knees. The Mustang's silhouette stood black against the pale light, beautiful and untamed. For a moment, peace settled over her shoulders like a blanket. Then she heard it the soft snap of a twig. Another. 2 shapes moved behind the barn. Her pulse slowed instead of quickening. She set her hat on the table, rolled her shoulders once, and blew out the lamp. All right, boys, she murmured. Let's see what you've learned about talking louder. She slipped out the back door, boots sinking into cool dust. The air smelled of sage and iron. One man was already near the gate, rope in hand, the other standing guard. Ellie waited until they stepped closer to the pen before speaking. You left your manners at the saloon, she said. The men spun, startled by her voice cutting through the dark. Lady, one hissed, move aside. She didn't. This horse ain't yours, never was, and you ain't taking him tonight. We got orders, the scarred one said. From who? She asked. His grin flashed. From the man who owned this place. The name hit her like grit in the wind. Hank Morrow's dead, she said flatly. Ain't what we heard, he replied. Some debts don't die easy. He stepped forward, hand drifting toward his holster. Ellie's voice stayed calm. You take one more step, and you'll be the next ghost living in that barn. The man hesitated, but his partner wasn't so smart. He lunged. The rifle cracked once, loud and clean. The bullet hit the dirt a foot from his boot. That was me, being polite, Ellie said. Next one's me mean. The Mustang screamed, rearing in his pen. The sound tore through the valley like thunder. The men froze, startled by the wild power behind them. That horse, Ellie said softly, ain't yours to tame. Something in her tone made even the scarred man step back. We'll tell him you said that, he muttered, and they turned to leave. She didn't lower the rifle until their silhouettes were swallowed by the dark. Only then did she exhale, shoulders trembling just enough to prove she was still human. The Mustang snorted, pacing the fence. It's all right, she said. Storms passed for now. Morning brought silence, and the smell of rain on dust. Ellie patched the gate and mended a cracked board, every motion steady and precise. She'd lived too long in a world where fear came cheap. She wouldn't spend another cent on it. The Mustang followed her along the fence line, curious, calmer. When she reached out again, he didn't flinch. Guess we earned each other's trust, she said. He leaned close, warm breath, brushing her palm. It felt like forgiveness. Good, she whispered. We're gonna need it. Later that day, a wagon rolled up the trail. Sheriff Harlan, hat low, coat dusty. Heard shots, he said, climbing down. You all right? Ellie nodded. Didn't hit nothing that bled. He glanced toward the pen. That the horse they were after? That's him. Harlan sighed. You sure you want to keep him here? Men like Dixon don't scare easy. Ellie met his eyes. Neither do I. The sheriff studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll put word around. But if they come back, don't wait for me. Wasn't planning to, she said. He smiled faintly. Didn't think so. Days passed without trouble, though the quiet carried weight. Ellie could feel the land listening, waiting. Each evening, she'd sit by the fire reading Martha's old letters again, now yellowed at the edges. The Mustang would stand nearby, close enough that she could hear him breathing. You got a name now, she told him one night. Storm. Suits you. He flicked his ears, as if agreeing. We're alike, you and me, she went on. World tried to break us, but all it did was teach us how to stand. The horse lowered his head, and she smiled. Good boy. The next week brought riders again, different ones this time. 3 men in clean coats, badges pinned crooked to their chests. They claimed to be lawmen from Cheyenne, come to recover stolen stock. Ellie leaned on her shovel, unimpressed. You got papers? She asked. They didn't. Then you got nothing. The leader, a man with slick hair and eyes like polished stone, smiled too easily. That horse belonged to a man named Morrow. We're just reclaiming property. Property don't bleed, Ellie said. His smile slipped. Careful, miss. She met his gaze. Always am. When they left, she knew it wasn't over. That night, she packed saddlebags with jerky, oats, and her father's old revolver. If they want you that bad, she told Storm, there's something about you they ain't saying. She led him out under the moonlight, their shadows stretching long across the sand. The air shimmered with heat even in the dark. We'll ride east a few miles, she said. Find a new hideout till I figure this out. Storm followed without hesitation. Trust was heavy, but she carried it well. They rode until dawn, stopping near a dry riverbed fringed with cottonwoods. Ellie set up camp, letting Storm graze near the creek's edge. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to rest. But peace never lasted long in her life. A glint on the ridge caught her eye. Sunlight bouncing off metal. A scope. She dove for cover, just as a bullet split the air. So that's how you want to play, she muttered. Another shot rang out, closer. Storm reared, neighing sharply. Ellie scrambled for her rifle, heart steady, mind clear. Fine, she said. You asked for loud. She returned fire. 2 quick shots, aiming for the flash of light. Silence followed. Then, faintly, hooves retreating. She crawled to the horse, running a hand along his neck. You all right? He snorted, trembling but unhurt. Good boy. You did fine. She looked toward the ridge again. Whoever they weren't bandits. They were organized and patient. You're worth more than I thought, she said quietly. But I ain't trading you for safety. By midday, she found the answer she hadn't expected. While searching the pack saddle she'd salvaged from the barn, she discovered a false bottom inside the pouch, and within it, a folded sheet of paper. Faded ink, Morrow's handwriting. It was a ledger, listing wild horse captures and sales. But at the bottom, one entry stood apart. Stallion number 47 federal stock, U.S. Army breeding program. Do not sell. Ellie exhaled. So that's it. You ain't just wild, you're government property. She looked at Storm, who snorted. Guess that makes 2 of us unwanted by the law. When night came, she built no fire. The stars burned cold and close above. She sat beside Storm, tracing the names on the ledger again. He caught you for money. They killed him to keep it quiet. The horse shifted, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder. Don't worry, she said softly. Ain't no man taking you back to a cage. She tore the ledger into pieces and buried it beneath the sand. They'll have to dig up the whole desert to find the truth now. Storm exhaled, long and calm, like he understood. In the distance, lightning flashed. No storm this time, just the dry kind that never reaches rain. Ellie saddled up, scanning the horizon. "They'll come again," she said. "But this time, I'll be ready." The wind picked up, tugging her coat, whispering her name through the cottonwoods. Storm pawed the ground, eager, alert. She mounted, rifle slung across her back. $5, she muttered with a half-smile. "Guess that was the down payment on trouble," the horse snorted, and together they rode into the dark, dust rising behind them like smoke from old sins. By dawn, they were back at the cabin, the only home she'd ever chosen. The sky bled orange over the mountains, light spilling across the roof she'd mended with her own hands. The Mustang trotted ahead, tail high, defiant. Ellie dismounted and turned toward the horizon, where riders would surely appear again. "All right," she said softly. "Come and claim what's mine." Her voice didn't waver. In the doorway behind her, the wind whispered through the boards, sounding almost like applause. She smiled. "This ain't about owning anymore," she said. "It's about belonging." The third morning dawned still and strange. Not a bird called, not a leaf stirred. Ellie felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, the weight of something coming. Storm stood near the corral, ears pricked eastward. Dust was rising on the horizon, a pale column twisting like smoke. Riders, more than two this time. Ellie rested her hand on the fence post, steadying herself. "All right," she murmured. "Looks like the law finally found its way out here." The wind tugged her hat brim. The horse stamped once, ready. So was she. The riders came slow, deliberate. 4 soldiers, uniforms sun-bleached, an officer leading them. The man's face was calm, in the way only authority can afford to be. "Miss Carson," he said when they reached the gate, "I'm Captain J.H. Lawson of the United States Cavalry. You're harboring federal property." Ellie didn't move. "If you mean that horse," she said evenly, "he's got no brand, no tag, and no owner but the land." Lawson dismounted, dusting his gloves. "That stallion's from our breeding program stolen 2 years ago. We've been tracking him ever since." Ellie studied him. "You're a little late," she said. "He's not stolen. He's saved." Lawson's expression didn't change. "It's not a matter of sentiment, ma'am. That animal's government property, bred for endurance and war. It's valuable." Ellie leaned her rifle against the porch rail. "You see a weapon. I see a survivor." Lawson nodded toward his men. "We'll take him quietly." "You can try," she said. Her voice was calm, not raised, but something in it made the nearest soldier hesitate. Storm shifted his weight, eyes bright, every inch of him alive and unbroken. Lawson sighed. "I don't want bloodshed, Miss Carson." "Then don't spill any." She stepped down from the porch, boots sinking into dust. "That horse has been hunted, chained, whipped, and left to starve. He's not going back to a corral with numbers painted on the post." Lawson's jaw tightened. "You're interfering with federal business. And you're trespassing on private land," she said. "Bought fair and legal for $5. He looked at her, long and level. "You'd risk your life for an animal?" "No," she said softly. "For freedom. His and mine both." The silence between them stretched until even the wind grew cautious. Then Lawson gave a single nod to his men. 2 soldiers stepped forward with ropes. Ellie raised the rifle, not aiming yet, just holding it where the light could catch the metal. "You won't win this," Lawson said quietly. "Wasn't trying to," she replied. "Just trying not to lose what's left." He held her gaze another moment, then motioned his men back. "I'll give you an hour to think, Miss Carson," he said. "Then we do this the Army's way." They turned toward their horses, waiting at the ridge. Ellie leaned against the fence, heart steady, but heavy. Storm stood beside her, breath warm on her shoulder. "You hear that?" she whispered. "An hour." The horse tossed his head, restless. She stroked his neck slowly. "I won't let them take you. But if we run, they'll chase. They always do." The Mustang pawed at the ground, as if answering. Ellie smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know what you're saying. We were never meant to stay still." She looked toward the hills, golden under the Sunday. "All right, partner. Guess it's time to ride." She saddled her mare, tied her gear, and opened the corral. Storm stepped out, nostrils flaring at the open land. He hesitated, glancing back toward her. "Go on," she urged. "You ain't meant to follow, not this time." But he didn't move. She frowned. Stubborn thing. With a sigh, she swung into the saddle. "Fine, we'll go together one last ride." The wind picked up as if agreeing. She nudged her mare forward, Storm trotting beside her, black mane flying like a banner of defiance against the Sunday. They rode north through the valley, dust billowing behind them. The land opened wide, endless and bright. Every hoofbeat echoed against the ridges, a heartbeat of defiance. Ellie glanced back, once saw the riders in the distance, smaller but closing. "They'll follow till the mountains," she murmured. "After that, it's all wilderness." She leaned low, whispering to the mare. "Let's give 'em something to remember." They cut east toward a dry creek bed, the Mustang matching her stride, untethered and fierce. The two moved as one woman and horse, born of the same stubborn dust. By midday, the heat shimmered like glass. The soldiers were still behind them, distant but steady. Ellie slowed near a narrow pass, two cliffs pressing together, a funnel of rock. "Here," she said. "We can lose them here." She dismounted, tying her mare to a boulder. "Storm, come on." The Mustang followed, nostrils flaring. She climbed the slope with careful speed, setting loose rocks rolling into the canyon below. The echo thundered through the pass, startling the soldiers' horses into rearing. Dust exploded upward. Shouts echoed. "That's right," Ellie said, smiling grimly. "Keep guessing." When the dust cleared, only silence remained. Ellie watched from above, heart pounding but calm. The soldiers regrouped, arguing, uncertain which way she'd gone. She turned to Storm, who stood on the ridge beside her, wild and radiant. "Looks like we bought some time," she said. "But not forever," the horse snorted. "Yeah," she replied. "Forever's overrated anyway." They descended the far side of the ridge, moving toward a valley where the grass grew thick and untamed. It was beautiful, the kind of place where wild things belonged. "Maybe this is what he wanted for you," she said softly. They rested near a shallow stream. Ellie drank, splashing her face with cold water. Storm stepped into the creek, lowering his head to drink, mane shimmering in the Sunday. For a long while there was no sound but wind and water. Then Ellie spoke. "You know, I used to think home was something you built. Turns out it's something that happens when you stop running." She watched him lift his head, droplets scattering like silver. "You got your home right here. You don't need me to stay for it to mean something." The sun tilted westward when she heard hooves again faint, cautious. She turned. Lawson had come alone this time. He dismounted slowly, keeping distance. "You made me ride farther than I planned, Miss Carson." "Wasn't personal," she said. "You could still turn back." He looked at the Mustang. "You know, I joined the Army thinking I was protecting the wild. Turns out all I've done is cage it." Ellie studied him, then nodded toward Storm. "Then do something right for once." Lawson exhaled. "You know I can't." "Then don't say you respect freedom." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind carried a hawk's cry across the valley. Lawson removed his gloves, looked at his hands scarred, clean, uncertain. "He'll vanish," he said quietly. "They'll send others." "Let 'em," she replied. "He knows how to disappear." Lawson looked at her, something breaking in his gaze. "You sure you're not the one who needs salvin'?" "Already saved myself," she said. Just took a horse to remind me how." He smiled faintly, then turned toward his mount. "I never saw you," he said. "Not today, not ever." "Reckon we agree," Ellie answered. When he rode off, she waited until the sound faded. Then she turned to Storm. "Well, partner," she said softly, "that's as close to mercy as we get out here." The Mustang blew air through his nostrils, almost like a laugh. She smiled. "Guess it's time." She removed his rope, her hand trembling only a little. "Go on," she said. "You don't owe me nothing." He didn't move at first, just watched her. "Go," she whispered again. Then, with a sudden grace, he reared and bolted a streak of black across the golden field, mane catching the sun like fire. She watched until he vanished over the hill, a dark flame swallowed by light. For a while, she stood in the silence he left behind. It wasn't empty. It was full of wind, sky, memory. Finally, she sat on the ground, drawing patterns in the dust with her boot heel. $5, she said softly. Guess it bought me everything I needed. A shadow crossed the ground. She looked up, a hawk circling high above. "Keep him safe," she whispered. The bird tilted its wings and soared after the direction Storm had gone. By nightfall, Ellie returned to the cabin alone. The place looked smaller without him, but warmer too, like it had finally exhaled. She lit a lamp and set a single tin cup on the table. "One for me," she said quietly, "and one for the road." She poured water into both, raising her cup. "To second chances, the kind you don't keep, just pass along." The wind moved through the cracks in the wall, soft and kind. For the first time, the house didn't sound lonely. It sounded alive. Weeks passed. The valley stayed quiet. Folks in town said they'd seen a black horse running with a wild herd near the border, stronger, faster, free. Ellie didn't correct them. She just smiled when they spoke his name, like a ghost story. "You ever gonna sell that ranch?" Harlan asked one day. "Not while it keeps standing," she said, "and not while I do." The sheriff nodded. "Reckon the land's in good hands." "It's in its own hands," she replied. "I just listened to it." When the rains came, the flowers bloomed thick and bright around the cabin, blues, yellows, whites. Ellie spent her mornings tending the garden, her evenings watching the horizon. She'd started writing letters again, not to anyone living. Just words, for whoever might find them someday. "If you ever come across this place, don't tear it down. Let it breathe. The world needs spots that remember mercy." She tucked the pages in a tin box and hid it under a floorboard, the same way stories always waited to be found. One morning, as the sun broke over the ridge, Ellie heard hooves on the hill, faint, distant. She stepped onto the porch, heart quickening. Against the light stood a dark shape, proud and still. Storm. He didn't come close, just watched her from afar. For a moment, neither moved. Then he tossed his head and galloped away, the herd following behind. Ellie smiled through the tears she didn't expect. "Good boy," she whispered. "You finally found your people." The wind carried her words across the valley, like prayer. Years later, travelers still spoke of the woman who bought a deserted ranch for $5 and built a life out of dust and kindness. Some said she'd tamed the wild. Others said she'd learned to live beside it. But those who passed by the valley swore that, at sunrise, a black stallion still ran near the old cabin, and a figure stood on the porch, hat in hand, watching. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was something more. Either way, the story lived proof that freedom, once given, never really leaves.